Welcome to part 3 of the Capriza UX and UI design training. In this section, we'll cover a few more interface elements in the skeleton layer and then move on to layer 5, surface. We'll begin by discussing an omnipresent feature of microapps, tables. If you're building a microapp, you're probably going to make use of a table. Well-designed data tables allow users to scan, analyze, and compare information to commit actions. However, creating a mobile-friendly display of a complex web-based table is a challenge. Here's some best practices to keep in mind when designing tables in your micro app. First, it's very important to identify the main purpose of the table. Is this table meant to provide read-only information or enable the user to take an action of some kind? We'll show how this affects design in a moment. Second, keep the number of column values at the top level to a minimum. The more values displayed at the top level of a table, the thicker the rows become. This reduces the number of rows that can fit onto a single page, requiring additional scrolling to view and compare rows. Finally, don't place anything below a table, and keep the number of tables per page to one tab only. We'll touch on various table styling tricks next, including display presets, labels, and item presets. Here are a couple tables with some different styling applied. Anytime a table is the first page of the microapp, such as the work list of an approval microapp, we recommend using the Cars display preset, featured in the first example here. This works best to define full row tap areas and capture the home page look and feel. Second, carefully consider the many mobile optimized presets available. Forms should always follow function. Depending on what information is being displayed, ensure that the item preset fits. In this second example, the table is using an item preset that allows for the opportunity amount to display right justified to facilitate scanning. Finally, always look for opportunities to limit information to allow for easier skimming and quicker decision times. A great way to accomplish this is by considering if tables are needed at the top level. Finally, always look for opportunities to limit information to allow for easier skimming and quicker decision times. A great way to accomplish this is by considering if labels are needed at the top level. If a value can stand alone, i.e. doesn't need a label, it should be removed. If a value is ambiguous, such as dates, amounts, or IDs, they should remain to clarify meaning. In this last example, the item name stands on its own, needing no label. The two dates, however, need labels to tell them apart. Here are some great examples of what not to do with tables. In the first screenshot, you see that there are so many column values at this top level. In this case, there are editable fields. There isn't enough room for a single row to display completely. The user has no indication how many rows exist on the table. Also, these swipe actions in the second screenshot need labels and some kind of visual contrast. When the row is as thick as it is, the swipe actions look a little silly. Enterprise workflows contain data. Let's talk about text pairs, a common control to feature in a microapp. When there are many text pairs, left label placement makes best use of screen space and allows for more text pairs to fit on the page, which means less scrolling. It's also important to remember that the width of these labels is customizable, which is useful to minimize text wrapping. When there are fewer text pairs, the top left label placement, the Capriza default, works great. Bottom center label placement is great for prioritized data and can elegantly add variation to the page. Text pairs can also be horizontally paired or grouped in cards as they are short and related. Speaking of text in general, always be sure that it's left aligned unless it's a short instructional text such as in a confirmation or error modal, in which case center alignment works best. Let's move on to forms, another very common component in enterprise workflows. If a form is long, it may be possible to break it into sections. However, there are a couple caveats to keep in mind when considering this. First, don't use tabs. We touched on why in the tab section, but discoverability and error handling could be issues. Instead, a progress bar may work, like in the first example here. Again, this could be a potential problem for handling errors. If there is no local validation on the fields, the user doesn't know what step an error is on when they submit the form. Best case, use section headers like the right example demonstrates. In terms of field styling, the default full border preset works best to clearly define tap areas. Top left labels help align the form. Lastly, pair inputs if they're related and short, like dates. Don't forget to specify the input type. Is the field asking for an email address, a date, a number? Fields are configurable to fit these input types and provide the relevant keyboard for the user. If your users will be accessing a micro app on tablet devices, you should optimize the design for the slightly larger form factor. When designing for tablet, there are a couple small interface tweaks that may have a big impact. First, use the container pages display. This brings the left and right edges of the content in to match a fixed width and makes things easier to read by providing a fixed layout despite varying device browser widths. Second, with the additional screen space tablet devices afford, designers can use the tabular display of a table. Remember that the column widths are customizable. Cater to the longest value in each column. Lastly, elevate content on the page by using various grouping strategies to best use the additional negative space. Once the general UI layout has been established, consider leveraging pages from Exista Capriza templates to more quickly build out your micro app. Micro app builders can export entire pages from any template and import them into a different micro app. Here are common pages present in our templates that may come in handy, which include a lookup modal, approval detail page, and confirmation. Additionally, template groups and components can be exported and added into your micro app as well. Here are common components in our templates that can come in handy, which include expandable search group, a progress bar, and a contact header. We have arrived at the final layer, surface. Congratulations. This layer represents the sum total of all the work and decisions we micro app designers have made during this design process. It determines how the micro app will look like, choosing the right iconography, colors, and layout. It should make things easier to understand, increasing cognitive ability to allow the user to absorb what they see on the page. Our presets and templates do the heavy lifting here, which come to life in the style mode. We'll arm you with the best practices about how and when to use presets in template UI. First, we'll talk about consistently styling action buttons. What combination of color and iconography can reduce decision-making time? We'll cover some gold standards we recommend. Next, be careful when using icons. Will my users know what this icon means? Use icons sparingly and remember that universal icons are rare. Finally, use color sparingly. How will I use color to prioritize actions and elements? In Layer 4, Surface, we discovered how action button language and placement can have major implications. Now, we'll cover how best to style them. First of all, you'll notice that all the examples in this training use floating bars with the Action Bar floating bar preset. This adds a nice padding around each button to give it some more breathing room. In terms of labels, be sure to use either icons and text or just text. Never use just icons. Since action buttons represent the transaction point of the micro app, designers must provide as much clarity as possible. We recommend the following use of colors for action button iconography. Green for affirmative actions such as save, add new, approve, submit, or send. Blue for neutral actions such as search, refresh, edit, forward, continue, or redo. Gray for resetting actions such as undo, cancel or clear changes, or start over. And finally, red for affirmative negative actions such as reject, delete, or cancel request. Be sure to use the default color palette that's baked in. We don't recommend using a full background color for action buttons as they can be visually distracting for the user. Limit color application to iconography only and perhaps select affirmative actions. Here are various label and icon combinations that are present in our templates. These are very common actions in enterprise workflows. Feel free to adopt these for your own micro app. Designers may add icons to buttons, headers, tabs, or similar controls within a micro app. While icons create a more visually pleasing UI and enable easier navigation, it is important to ensure icons are meaningful and recognizable by using them sparingly. Universal icons are rare. While icons are widely used in web and mobile design, few carry the same universal meaning. Some icons are used in different ways across different websites and apps. So, when users encounter an icon, they can't be sure that any single meaning is going to be the right meaning for that context. For example, a star icon is used on many websites and applications to indicate a user rating, while others use them as a way to mark something as favorite or save it for later. When designing your micro app, consider whether the icons you're choosing will have the same meaning to all user groups. Consider existing assets by examining the iconography of your source application. Are there icons that users are already accustomed to that you may want to repurpose? Because there are no universal icon standards, using a text label is very often necessary to ensure your users understand its meaning, especially on an action button. Finally, use the 5-second rule. If it takes longer than 5 seconds to think of an icon to represent the controlled action or purpose, it is unlikely your users will recognize it. Included here are some bulletproof icons. There aren't many icons that carry a universal meaning like these do. These are great icons to include in your micro app because they carry the same meaning across multiple mobile and web applications. Finally, there's color. Color helps users see and understand content, interacts with proper elements, and understand actions. Be sure to use custom color sparingly. Your company's brand color should be present in the page header of the micro app, which may be enough to express the brand. Small and thoughtful applications of brand color elsewhere can make a big difference. Also important, avoid using the same color in both interactive and non-interactive elements. If interactive and non-interactive elements have the same color, it's harder for users to know where to tap. Finally, make sure that there is ample contrast between the font color and the background so that text is legible. The example on the left shows over-excessive use of color. There is no indication of what's important due to the loud color combinations. The example to the right shows a micro app page with very little contrast between the background color and text. My fellow micro app designer, we have reached the end of Capriza's UX and UI training, covering the fundamentals of micro app design. We've moved through each of our 5 layers of user experience from bottom to top, from the abstract feel to the more concrete look. As we covered in the very beginning, the decisions that you made in each layer build on each other, informing and influencing all aspects of the user experience. Now go forth and build well-designed micro apps with Capriza. Thanks for listening.